The U.S. ambassador to Canada has a warning for Canadians. Pete Hoekstra says the way this country is...
We are not going to implement tariffs on any products that are covered.
The U.S.-Canada trade battle under Donald Trump is heating up once again. Recently, U.S. Ambassador to Canada Pete Hoekstra delivered a blunt warning. Canada's retaliatory tariffs are calling into question the future of the CUSMA trade agreement, the backbone of North American commerce. According to the Canadian government, CUSMA covers about 85% of goods traded between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. This agreement directly affects millions of jobs in vital supply chains across the continent. So when a senior Trump official hints the deal could be reconsidered, the message is clear. If Canada refuses to give ground, the rules of the game may change.
Are a huge irritant. We have protected the integrity of CUSMA.
I was also really struck by the fact that his tone and his comments about CUSMA are increasingly pointed.
In a recent interview, Hoekstra stated that the U.S. has honored its protective guardrails by not imposing tariffs on goods covered by CUSMA. But Canada, he claims, broke that principle by applying retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products. This framing serves two purposes. First, to reassure American businesses that Washington is playing by the rules. Second, to inject anxiety into the Canadian political debate, putting Ottawa under domestic pressure. More importantly, it's a calculated move ahead of CUSMA's 2026 review, or possibly sooner if Trump wants to force the timeline. By casting Canada as the destabilizing actor, the U.S. hopes to put Ottawa on the defensive before talks even begin.
Was recounting an alternative history of what had happened in terms of the notion that Canada had somehow attacked the United States.
Tax is an example of that. But for now, we also can't just give everything up.
Canadian analysts were quick to push back, accusing Hoekstra of rewriting history. In reality, they argue, the U.S. fired the first shot in this trade war by slapping tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and auto exports. Ottawa's countermeasures were just that. Countermeasures. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government insists these tariffs are necessary bargaining tools. Measures like the digital services tax could be rolled back if they secure concrete benefits in negotiations. But Canada will not unilaterally disarm while Washington keeps the pressure on. Public opinion appears to be on Carney's side. Polls show Canadians still support a firm stance against Trump's trade offensive.
There's some really serious economic trouble.
Yeah, the CUSMA reevaluation is technically set to start in...
CUSMA keeps North American trade flowing smoothly, lowering costs and protecting cross-border supply chains. For Canada, it's a shield for critical export sectors like autos, agriculture, and energy. If CUSMA weakens or collapses, tariffs would return, raising costs for Canadian producers and eroding their competitiveness in the U.S. market. But the impact wouldn't stop at the border. Many U.S. states with manufacturing-heavy economies would also suffer major job losses. This mutual dependence is Canada's strongest card, lobbying U.S. lawmakers, governors, and industry groups to push back against any move to dismantle the agreement. And because the stakes are so high, Trump's trade strategy becomes the decisive factor in how this plays out.
I don't think we should necessarily take the ambassador's words, or frankly anyone.
Trump has long viewed tariffs as both a pressure tactic in negotiations and a direct source of revenue. His America First approach doesn't spare allies. If a deal doesn't serve U.S. interests as he defines them, he's willing to squeeze partners to get what he wants. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, and autos have been more than economic measures. They've been political messages to show Trump will take on anyone, even close allies, if it benefits the U.S. in the short term. As ambassador, Hoekstra is the conduit for that message in Ottawa, shaping the narrative so the U.S. looks like the aggrieved party and Canada appears unreasonable.
Now sort of a must-heal relationship in order to sort of work together to try and deal with Donald Trump.
I mean, I think all indications point that
Canada is not without options. Retaliatory tariffs and the digital services tax remain potent bargaining chips. Strengthening ties with Mexico, the third CUSMA partner, is also critical. A united Canada-Mexico front makes it harder for Washington to divide and conquer in negotiations. At the same time, Ottawa is stepping up outreach to U.S. states and industries that would be hurt by renewed tariffs, creating domestic pressure within the U.S. to keep CUSMA intact. On a broader scale, Canada is diversifying trade toward Europe and Asia and boosting domestic production to reduce reliance on U.S. markets.
Some ways aligned. I think the reality is the ambassadors...
These levers will directly shape the possible scenarios. 1. Status quo until 2026. Tensions remain but don't escalate, with both sides holding their positions for the review. 2. Accelerated U.S. pressure. Trump moves early to reopen talks, ramping up economic threats to force concessions. 3. Interim deal. Canada offers limited concessions to ease short-term economic strain. In all scenarios, tariffs are unlikely to vanish. They will remain one of Trump's favorite tools in this new term.
Industry and Canadians need to start sort of preparing themselves. I think Jordan's right. This is looming large.
This standoff is not just about steel, aluminum, or any single product. It's a test of trade power between Donald Trump and Canada, with CUSMA as the central battlefield. Hoekstra may be the messenger, but the message from Trump is unmistakable. If Canada won't step back, Washington is ready to use CUSMA as a bargaining chip. For Carney's Canada, the challenge is to defend while counterattacking, using every diplomatic, economic, and political channel to protect the country's long-term interests against a determined and highly calculated opponent. The trade dispute between the United States and Canada has intensified under President Donald Trump's renewed protectionist push. Early in his current term, Trump's administration imposed sectoral tariffs targeting specific industries on key Canadian exports such as steel, aluminum, and automobiles. These measures hit at the heart of Canada's manufacturing base, serving as both an economic weapon and a political signal. Canada, under Prime Minister Mark Carney's leadership, responded with a package of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, signaling it would not accept unilateral U.S. pressure without consequence. In Ontario, where much of Canada's heavy industry is located, the provincial government announced CAD $1 billion in emergency loan support to help businesses survive the immediate impact. The Carney government framed these measures as both a shield for workers and a warning to Washington that Canada was prepared for a long-term fight. Reactions to U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra's recent comments were swift. Many Canadian analysts accused him of rewriting history, portraying Canada as the aggressor while ignoring that it was Washington that initiated the conflict. Hoekstra's warning that retaliatory measures could jeopardize CUSMA was interpreted as a calculated move to apply pressure ahead of the 2026 review of the agreement. Some experts acknowledge that certain countermeasures risk raising costs for Canadians, but agree that removing them prematurely would weaken Canada's negotiating position. This debate over costs leads directly to Canada's strategic challenge: maintaining negotiating leverage without damaging its own economy. Retaliatory tariffs and the digital services tax remain valuable tools for securing concessions. Another key component is closer cooperation with Mexico, the third CUSMA member. By presenting a united front, both countries can resist U.S. attempts to pit them against each other. A classic divide-and-conquer strategy. Experts broadly agree that tariffs in some form are likely here to stay, making it essential for Canada to diversify export markets, strengthen domestic production, and reduce dependency on the U.S. Public opinion is currently an asset for Ottawa. Canadians strongly support the government's firm stance, willing to bear short-term costs to defend national interests. However, this support is not limitless. Prolonged economic strain or rising unemployment could shift sentiment. Maintaining this backing will require visible action to protect affected industries and a clear narrative showing that resistance is in Canada's long-term interest. In conclusion, the latest phase of the U.S.-Canada trade standoff is about more than economics. It is a test of resolve. Trump's tariffs and Hoekstra's warnings are designed to pressure Ottawa into concessions, framing Canada as the destabilizing party. Carney's task is to defend national interests now while preparing for a pivotal 2026 CUSMA review. That means holding firm on leverage points, deepening alliances, and adapting to a trade landscape where tariffs are a constant feature. The next moves on both sides will signal whether this confrontation becomes a prolonged Cold War in North American trade or evolves into a tense but stable equilibrium. Ultimately, this confrontation is more than a bilateral trade dispute. It's a reflection of a shifting geopolitical and economic order in North America. For decades, Canada and the United States have been bound by deep economic integration, with trade agreements like NAFTA and now CUSMA serving as frameworks for stability. But Trump's tariffs and Hoekstra's warning reveal how quickly that stability can be disrupted when political priorities change. For Washington, this is about demonstrating that even close allies must operate on terms favorable to U.S. interests, as defined by the current administration. For Ottawa, it is about proving that Canada can stand its ground without losing access to its most important market. That balance is delicate. Too much confrontation risks economic harm, but too much accommodation risks political backlash at home and diminished credibility abroad. The stakes are especially high because CUSMA is not just a trade agreement. It is a legal and economic architecture underpinning billions in daily cross-border commerce. If its foundations are weakened, the ripple effects would spread across industries, communities, and political relationships throughout the continent. Prime Minister Carney's government faces a dual test, managing immediate tensions with a forceful U.S. administration while laying the groundwork for a resilient, diversified economy. Success will require a blend of firmness, diplomacy, and adaptability, not only in negotiating rooms but also in shaping public opinion and building strategic alliances. The road to the 2026 CUSMA review will be lined with provocations, opportunities, and critical decisions. Whether this period is remembered as the moment Canada asserted its economic independence, or as the point when North American trade became a casualty of political brinkmanship, will depend on the choices made now and the resolve to see them through.